Alright, I've got a piece of sheet metal here. I trimmed with some little electric shears that I've got here. It's just a cheap Chicago electric set of shears from Harbor Freight. This one's kind of old. I've had it a long time. Used it to cut up a lot of cars doing stuff like this. I don't have a sheet brake, a traditional one, so I'm gonna have to do all this by hand. What I do have is a set of these pliers right here, and they work pretty decent. And there's a bunch of different ways you can do this, but I'm going to make a little channel that goes inside here to kind of fit in where this factory one is, so I can fill this gap, because I got to do that first, and then I'll have to make the sheet metal that goes on the outside and bead roll that edge for the drip rail to go in, and then we'll build the drip rail itself. It's a pretty complicated piece right here. You just got to take it in steps. Whenever you do something like this, you want to inspect it, make sure you look and see how it was built from the factory. That way you can try to replicate it. You don't necessarily have to use a bead roller or a brake to make these, but it makes it a lot easier. I'm going to do this for the most part by hand. I do have a bead roller that I built out of an old Harbor Freight one and some Eastwood parts that I'll probably use to roll the bead, and we'll get to that next. I'm going to show you how I do this. Now, not everybody can probably do this if you don't have a lot of hand strength, but you just bend this over and then see how it makes kind of a rounded edge like that. Then you can take your body hammer, and this is 18 gauge steel. I use the thicker stuff because by the time you work it down and everything, it's a little closer to the 19 gauge that most of the manufacturers use to build vehicles with. So, but as you can see, it's kind of rounded like that. I'm going to take it like that, and it flattens it out. And then you got a 90-degree bend. Now, this only works for small stuff like this. If you're doing something big, of course, you're going to need to do something better with, like, maybe a vise, or see if you can borrow a buddy's sheet brake. All right. Now I got to make my next measurement. The middle part of this was, I believe, 2.5 inches. Check. Yeah, 2.5 inches. So I need to make a mark with my pen. Two-and-a-half-inch mark. Well, let's make one on both sides. There we go. Kind of made a little scratch part. You really shouldn't be using an ink pen for that, but that's what I've got in my pocket right here. There we go. Now we've got our little U-channel to go in here. Now I'm going to have to trim this down. This is obviously too wide, but it got me in the ballpark, so... And then I'm just using some hand shears to trim it off with. There we go. And I save a lot of these small pieces because sometimes you might need them to fill in a spot if there's something that's not quite even. If you take your time when you're making your cuts and really sand and file and do really good measurements, it usually fits better, and then you don't have as much problems doing that. So just take your time whenever you're measuring for your chop. Nothing's going to be 100%, but you can sure get it a lot closer. I probably could have got some of this a little closer, but I'm kind of constrained for time because I have a regular day job that I have to go to, so I can only do this in the evenings and on the weekends most of the time to do stuff. And there we go. We got our part. There we go. Now that can be welded in once I get this fitted where I want it. You want to make sure too, when you go to do this, make sure the sheet metal is even this way, and try to get it even as best as you can for your drip rail too. I've got a way that I'm going to do the drip rail. I'm actually going to try to bend it in place once I make the piece here. It's a little harder doing it that way, but I've done it before and it usually works, and you'll still get a similar profile as what you've got here. The only thing I might have to do on the bead rollers, there's a ridge that you can't see up underneath here, and I might have to run a bead across it with a rubber wheel and a sharp die that I've got, so I can try and make that part. But we'll get to that here when we get to that. I'm going to wire brush this inside a little bit. Some of it I've gotten cleaned up in there. You can't really see it because it's too dark. I don't have really good lighting in here. I need to get some more lights, but that'll come eventually. And I'm doing this kind of the way our grandfathers and mothers, whoever might have done back in the day. A lot of them didn't have the equipment we have today. Some of this equipment was available back then, but you had to be like a big name shop to have it, especially some of the modern technology like we've got now with the MIG welders and the TIG welders. That stuff wasn't really available. MIG welders have been around for a long time, but it didn't become common probably for people to have them. I don't figure until probably the 90s, maybe the 80s, something like that. I don't know exactly. You'd have to probably look it up. Alright, I've got my piece of sheet metal here that I'm fixing to make the patch panel to go inside this hole right here. I've got my kind of homemade-ish bead roller made out of various Harbor Freight and Eastwood parts and stuff. I'm going to roll a small bead in here so it'll step to go into the first notch, and then I'm probably going to have to hand bend the bottom part of it so that it fits correctly. So I'm fixing to do that now. Alright, normally you want to do this on a bigger piece of metal, but we'll try to see if I can get this without pinching my fingers. There we go. Close. It's usually easier to make multiple passes with just adding a little bit of pressure each time. That way you don't accidentally shear the metal. And if you can see right there, it's starting to make a little indentation right there from the bead roller. And these are just a set of step dies that came with it. I have some fancier dies, but I'm pretty sure these will do what I need them to. One more pass. That should be good. That looks pretty good. Trim a little bit off, that way fit up in the hole a little bit better. That's pretty good. Get these back out. It's maybe called like duckbill pliers or sheet metal pliers. I'm not really sure. I don't even know where I got these from. That just kind of crispens up the edge just a little bit. It's got kind of a hard edge on one spot and a soft edge in the other. So there you can see our piece. To fill in that gap, it'll have to be trimmed, of course, to fit. And the tighter you make your gaps, the better it will be to weld and to have everything fit like it's supposed to. Alright, I've got most of this kind of smoothed up a little bit. It still needs a little bit of work. In here, these little spots where I've got some spot welds, I like to use a Dremel tool to get in there to kind of grind those down and smooth them off. This is actually going to get covered with another piece of metal when I make the drip rail part, so you're not even going to see this, but you can see the little bead right there goes in there. It still needs a little filing right there. I'll probably use a hand file to get that cleaned up, and then pretty soon you won't even be able to tell anything was done there once I get done with it. So, and we've got the inside here. It looks pretty good. It's nice and smooth. Everything's pretty flush right through there. So I'm gonna get to trying to clean this up with the grinder. Hopefully I have enough of these little grinder discs to get this finished, and then we'll get to making the drip rail. You have to be careful doing this because these little wheels can break and throw stuff off, so make sure you always have your safety glasses on. You gotta protect your eyes. Especially if you're working on dashboards and tight areas. There you go. Looks a lot better than it did. Most of that you're not going to be able to see once we put the drip rail in anyway, so. But, let's set that down. And you can see how I got it kind of ground in there. Kind of notched it back out because the new piece will go in there. And you can still kind of see the edge. It needs a little more sanding and fine tuning right there, and a few little spots touched up, but I'll be able to blend all that in, and a little hammer dolly work, and that'll come out pretty good. Next thing we'll have to do is I got to line this all back up. I got to stretch it back up a little bit so that it's even where it's supposed to be. My little clamp up there, it came loose, but I figured it was going to, so we'll get it fixed up and get this done, and then this side will be almost done, except for we need to get this gap fixed, and then once we get that gap fixed, this side will pretty much be ready to go for the most part, and I'll be able to start making the door tops. I'll have to grind these welds down, of course, but we'll get to the door tops, and the driver's side will be about ready to go. Alright, I've got this pretty well good. I actually found out I did have an extra piece of that stuff, so I think I am going to try to use it on both sides to make that. It'll just make it a little bit quicker. I can make a die out of washers, but it's kind of late, and I'd have to wait till tomorrow, and I'd like to get this done tonight. But you can see the little piece of the garnish molding I cut, and it fits in here pretty well. Needs to be tweaked just a little bit, and the back side kind of ground up, but that works pretty good. And then what I'll do is I'll hammer and dolly this flat right here, so that way I can tack weld a small piece of metal on. I may try to see if I can rig up the TIG welder to see if I can get it to work, even though I still haven't got the parts in for it yet. But I might be able to get it good enough to do that, and then once we get that done, we should have the little detail work there and be ready to go. So let's see, I'll flatten this out a little bit. I don't know if you can see, I'm going to use the edge of my bead roller here, kind of hammer this down. There we go. Just kind of flattened it out, turned it into a little tab right there. It's down in there pretty good. Not quite perfect, but close enough, I think.